dive into the what or the how, first I want to talk about the why. Why are we having this conversation? Because ultimately, this is a conversation that is relatively new. It's not something that we would have talked about. So first I'm going to talk about the why are we having this conversation at all, and then why now. So first of all, why at all? So personality is something that we haven't talked about too much in work, and oftentimes the response I get is, "Ugh, why do we need to talk about personality? This is in kindergarten. Why can't people just show up, do their job, and go home?" Now, first of all, the reason is I want you to think of a person who truly loves their job, that they truly love their work. Now, this is something that some of us have been lucky enough to experience ourselves, but most of us at least know somebody who has made that transition from a job that they did and it was okay to a job that they truly loved. One gentleman I worked with, he did HVAC installing, and he said, "I did this for years." And then I realized somebody told me that maybe you should consider sales. And so he took those years of experience he had gained installing and moved to the customer side, to actually sitting down with the customer, troubleshooting it. And and he was incredible. And he loved it. And he said, "I found what I was meant to do." And he said, "I wake up, I am so excited every day to go to work," because now he's in the perfect job. Now, the alternative, who has known someone in the wrong job? That job that is soul sucking, that's you get the Sunday blues. I know I spent years in that job. It was terrible. I was burned out. I was a shell of a human being compared to who I became when I found that job that I was really meant to do. And the question is, which one do you want to be? Now, for you personally, of course, you want to love your job, but why does the employer care? When people love their work, when people are doing what they're meant to do, they're not just like 5 or 10% more efficient. They're 50, 100% more efficient. They are more creative, they're more capable, and that passion is infectious and it drives into the world around them. And so it's not just the person who wins, but it's the employer. Now, ultimately, though, this is still a relatively new conversation. It's not one that we would have had 20 years ago. So why now? So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and we're really focusing on the top, self-actualization, getting to do that thing that you're actually built to do, which classically hasn't been the problem we're trying to solve. Physiological needs, food, air, water, we've gotten really good at that, especially, in the last 70 years, become incredible at that, especially in the US, where I live in Hudson, Wisconsin, Midwest, literally, there's still pockets of hunger around where I live, but that's not something that we need to worry about on a daily basis. Safety needs. We've generally gotten really good at that. And so we've gotten so good at some of the base layers of that that we now actually have brain space. We have the capability to focus on that top piece because that's now become a valid problem to try and solve. But importantly, again, why are we having this conversation in a workplace about this? Ultimately, the biggest trigger has been the death of the social contract. It used to be that an employee would show up and they truly trust that their employer had their best interest at heart. Now, whether or not that was actually ever true, who knows? But when you had small companies, small communities, there was the trust between the community and the employer because if you screwed that up, nobody wins. But now, I mean, Jack Welchian economics has really killed this. Rank and yank, before the 1970s and the 1980s, layoffs was not normal. That was not a normal way to do business, but it is now. And so that trust is gone, whether the employer deserves it or not. The employee doesn't show up with it anymore. And it turns out that leading in low trust environments where, yeah, you're not necessarily going to die if you don't have that job. You have other options. Even if it's hard to get a job, there's still other options out there in the world. And so in this world, command and control leadership isn't working anymore. Who knew? Trust is important, and we need to find a way to rebuild that. Now, thankfully, we've had a lot of great people working on this for a while. Everybody from Simon Sinek, Pat Lencioni, um, Amy Edmondson, Jim Collins, Stephen M.R. Covey. These are all people who have really been working hard at improving the communication of teams and systems to improve that workplace experience. And they've done incredible things. But all of these tools pretty much all suffer from the same problem. I call it the last mile problem. This actually comes from mail delivery. And it's the basic idea that it's really cheap and easy to deliver a piece of mail from LA to New York, but it's expensive and incredibly difficult to ship it from the post office 3 miles down the road to your house. Why? Because going from LA to New York, there's 1,000 people sending letters that way. But to get a letter to your house, your individual house, every day is incredibly difficult. Personal scalability is hard, and it's true in leadership as well. And that's why Working Genius is so incredible, because it manages to make that gap. It actually gets something down to a personal level, to the point where a person can use this, experience it, where a team can use this. So it was developed by Pat Lencioni. He's written a number of great books, but the model that he's most recently created, Working Genius, is incredible. And it manages to ask the right questions so that we can get new, different, better results that we never would have thought possible. Because ultimately the right questions are, where do you find joy in work? Which serotonin, dopamine, sex, drugs, and gambling, people tend to find and press that happy button even when it's not good for them. And pain. What is that thing that makes you curl away, go, oh no, I don't want to do that? Joy and pain, these are the physical, these are the chemicals that your body respond to. And by measuring that along the phase of work, so specifically because Working Genius measures joy and pain along the process of work, we now have the ability to understand, okay, I'm right here, I'm in wonder, and this thing coming next, I'm not very good at that, so I need to go ask for help. That's the point, is it gives you that incredible ability. So Pat Lencioni has been great at creating different models, but this one is a step above anything else that he's done. So ultimately, geniuses, these are the ones in green. If you've ever taken Working Genius before, the green ones, these are where you find joy. This is where, if you get to do this, you're doing what you're meant to do. You're happy, you're healthy, and you could do this for 12 hours, no problem. You have excess capacity here. Our frustrations, on the other hand, these are things that cause us pain. These are difficult, these are hard, these are experiences, bottlenecks in all of us. We all have these. Some people are more willing or able to admit it, but they exist for all of us. And it's not about whether you're good or bad at it. People get very, very good at things that they hate doing all the time. This is why you see middle-aged men buying a Porsche, because they end up getting really good at something in their career that they actually kind of hate doing, but they've pigeonholed themselves into a career, and now they're doing it all the time. They don't see another way out, so they buy the Porsche to fill that hole. It doesn't work, because ultimately they're doing something that they're not built to do. This is a common experience that most people have. Now, the important part here is it's not just about you, it's about working with those around you. And why this is so powerful is because it creates a shared language to understand that, hey, we can be doing the same work with the same coworkers, with the same client, with the same tools. You can be on the same road, but two people, because they have different geniuses, they can experience the work differently. And having the ability to understand that, have empathy for those next to you, is incredible. The fact that I can look and go, I love this. I am so lucky that I get to do this. And look over at the person next to me and go, oh, wow, you must be really hurting right now. I'm sorry. And understanding that, being able to make that connection instantaneously, understanding how you can help them. That's what Brene Brown talks about, or sorry, Amy Edmondson talks about, that the ability to look at the person next to you, understand what their gifts are and what your gifts are, and how you can come together to maximize the utility. That's the point, is now you have the language to understand that. Now, shared languages, these are powerful. And it's been proven time and time again. My favorite example is money. Now, money was not always the shared language that it is today. The US dollar was first introduced post the Civil War. But there's 250 different US dollars at the time. It wasn't until 1916 that there was a unified US dollar. And then when it became global reserve currency post World War II, now we have Timu. Why? Because a US dollar means the same thing in China as it does in the United States. We understand what that means. We have a shared understanding of value. And when this happens, productivity goes up, collaboration goes up, transactions become simpler, faster, and there's fewer errors. And so when we create that shared language, it's powerful. We see the same thing with shipping containers changed the shipping industry, allowed for globalization. It allowed for faster, simpler communication. But when it comes to collaboration, when it comes to me working with you and trying to understand who you are, school never really taught us that. I mean, sports certainly did, and there were some great educators who really did their best, but it's not something we concentrated on. And on the things that we really graded on the things that we rewarded, collaboration was generally called cheating. And I get it. Again, this is a new technology. Working Genius is measuring something relatively new. A gentleman that I worked with, he'd been working for 30 years. And he said, no one has ever asked me where I find joy. Now, ultimately, the thing is in the real world, collaboration is a must. This isn't a nice to have, this is a need to have, because we now all work in group projects. There's so much specialization, there's so much interdependency in systems that we need to collaborate. And pretty much the only thing school taught us in group projects is how much we hated working with other people, and just it'd be much better if I could just do this. But that's where Working Genius is different. That's what allows us to bridge that gap. So now we're going to walk through the model. We're going to briefly explore what are each of these geniuses, why does it matter, how does this show up for me? Now, if you've taken Working Genius before, I'm hoping you have your results in front of you, because ultimately you're going to be able to follow through and go, how does this show up for me? If you haven't taken Working Genius before, that's okay. You can still get value out of this too. Because typically people can pick out their leading genius where they find the most joy, and they can pick out their frustration, that thing that's like, oh God, please no, don't. And so I want you to listen. I want you to consider, how does this show up for me? Do I enjoy this? Do I sometimes enjoy it too much and do it too much? Or does this cause me pain? Is this something that I've really felt pain in the past? Is this something someone has helped me with? And so you can, as you hear each one of these, I want you to really think, how does this show up for me? Is this causing pain somewhere? Because oftentimes it does. So first of all, wonder. This is the first genius, and it's a responsive genius of thought, which makes it really hard to observe until you know what you're looking for. This is why teachers so oftentimes will say that wonders look disengaged, that they don't really look like they're engaged in a meeting and work. But it's not that they're disengaged, it's that they're thinking so deeply about, what is the problem we're even here to solve? Why did we do that? And when you learn to look for it, when you understand what you're looking for, you can actually learn to see it, because it looks something like this. Now, the point is that wonder will think. It's in its head. You can literally watch some wonder and you can see something percolating, but you have to have the patience to allow it to form. My son is a wonder. And I know that when I ask him a question, I need to give him the time to think, to respond. And you can actually watch his eyes go up in his head. It's like he's looking for something. Now that's wonder. And the point of wonder is that you go, I know that this is what we're trying to do. I know we want to go north, but there's a cliff right there, and I think we need to turn left. One of my favorite examples of a company not operating from wonder is Blockbuster. At one point, they said they're not going to go to a subscription model because they get 11% of their revenue through late fees. Now, there's some bad branding in late fees anyways to make it punitive, as opposed to an extended rental. But the key here is that late fees was a problem your customer is going to be solving shortly, and you just happen to remain part of the problem. They were so stuck to what they were doing that they couldn't see the problem that they needed to solve. And that's what happens when people don't wonder. So there's a million examples of this, but so much of this can be summarized in Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So much of wonder and why is synonymous. It doesn't have language. It can't always communicate well. And you have to have patience and you need to figure it out. But there are people who love to do this and you can allow them to do it, but then you need to be willing to listen and understand it might not make sense to you right away. You need to be patient and you need to consider the idea. Now, the craves and crushes, these are things that we either need to, find joy and energy in our work, or that crush us, that make it really difficult for us to operate. So craves, this gives us joy and energy. For wonder, it's consideration. When you have that boss who goes, oh, why can't you just shut up and do your job? Versus, that's an interesting, I would never would have thought to do that. I don't think that's going to work. But let's set some time. Let's talk about that. Set time for 15 minutes. Let's find time to talk about that. When you have that boss who's willing to listen to the idea and consider it, one, it can change a company because it's the line level people doing the work that come up with the best ideas, but it's difficult to communicate that to the top. Two, that worker, the experience is transformational. So wonder is meant to come up with what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Invention, this is the one with the new idea. People with invention as a genius describe it as this like fire hose of new ideas shooting out of their head at all times, and they just can't stop it. It's a disruptive genius of thought. And my favorite example, a lady I worked with, she's an IT, invention tenacity, so lots of practical, tactical ideas. And her and her husband had a business together, and they were trying to find things to do outside of the business. I'm like, write up a list. Come up with 10 or more things. If you can come up with more, I'd love to see them. Knowing full well I'd get quite the extensive list. But I never in the world expected to get 4 pages front and back with over 200 different ideas. I then turned to the husband and said, okay, which looks like the least objectionable option. Looks like you got a couple options to try from. Try 1 or 2 a week. Knowing that for her, just getting the ideas out there, being able to communicate that was huge. But that's invention as a genius. 200 different ideas. I said, come up with 10. She came up with 200. It's just overflowing and you can't stop it. When these people end up working really, there's another gentleman I worked with on IEWD, so a really creative guy. He said he worked in a factory for about 15 minutes before he's ready to throw himself in a machine because for him, showing up and doing the same thing every day is literally going to kill him. So invention is the pop the new novel idea, and it craves the freedom to be able to advance that idea somehow. Like, even if it's just one step, even if it's not me doing the work, just being able to see the idea be tried. Because if I have all these ideas and nothing happens, then why am I here? And wonder and invention both really crave so much of that freedom and that consideration, because ultimately, if you're just doing the same thing every day, it becomes really draining, feels hollow. And 25% of the population is wonder, 26% has invention. People need this to find joy in their work. So from there, wonder and invention, this comes up with all the crazy ideas. Discernment is then meant to evaluate those ideas and determine which one is right. It's a false negative test. It is going to look at the world and go, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, even when one of those things may have been right, but it was looking at problems that discernment wasn't willing to solve. Again, wonder, what's the problem we're trying to solve? It will try and solve new, bigger problems than our current situation might show. Discernment looks at it and goes, well, that's wrong. So wonder is a false positive test. Discernment is a false negative. And so discernment will oftentimes tell you something is wrong, even when it's not. But the reason discernment is important because it's meant to do that. It's meant to be the filter. It's meant to pull things out because it has this incredible ability to sense when something is wrong. One of my favorite examples of this, there's a lady, she was pulled up into a leadership team because turns out the leadership team had no discernment. They're like, is this why we keep having things break? And looking back, we're like, oh, that was a stupid decision. We really should have known that was going to not work. They're like, yeah, that would do it. They brought her up, and in 2 weeks, she was sitting in the back, and her one job was stand up, and when we say something stupid, tell us. And she's like, that's your problem. What? That's your problem. Now, for her, she couldn't really elaborate beyond that as to the why or how she knew that. She just knew. And she brought that to the team. And lo and behold, they come back next week and go, actually, you're right. That was the problem. And that's costing us about $500,000 a year. And it's going to be really easy to fix. So thanks. Discernment has an ability to do that. Now, this is one of my frustrations. This is where my wonder is really focused on what's possible. I then count on the world around me, the people around me, to help me to vet those ideas, to go, how does that work? And in the end, I'm an expert in working genius. Expertise can help us fill any of these first four a little bit, not perfectly. So for me, working genius is an artificial form of discernment to understand the mechanics of an organization, of people systems. Because I don't have discernment. I rely on a tool to help me do that. So from there, though, this is the first half of the decision. Because it's so close to the decision, it really craves that trust. And when you have to sit around and prove it all the time, really a draining experience for people with discernment. Now, this is the first half of the decision. Doesn't mean you're an expert at making the decision. The second half is galvanizing. And this is the disruptive force that takes over the second after the decision is made. As soon as that has happened, that galvanizing is the piece that picks it up and makes the decision. Now, it's disruptive. My favorite example of galvanizing in action in like overflow mode is a leader was working with a team, and she was leading a restaurant group, and I don't want to do the dishes. Now, this was not the first time this happened, so the manager was pretty frustrated. She's like, why not? Because my hands will get pruny. Well, if I set your hands on fire, then you wouldn't be worried about them being pruny now, would you? And with the look in her eyes, you'd think she had lighter fluid and a lighter in her pocket. Now, is this appropriate? No. She's like, oh no, I'm going to get called. HR is going to get called. I'm not going to do oh no, that's not going to work. Now, it turns out the 16-year-old went, did the dishes, and it was fine. But that's the point. Galvanizing is meant to inspire action. For a crave, it craves a reaction. Because it is meant to be that disruptive force that starts something. And when a team doesn't have this, it kills, it's an absolute killer. A team that I worked with, they all had enablement, the next one. They're the most helpful group of people in the world, but no one had galvanizing. No one was able to be that one who would inspire everyone else towards motion. And it killed the team. Nicest group of people in the world. But the leader said, hardest working, nicest group of people, but they're all standing right around the corner going, I'd love to help. What do you need? No one could be the other half of that decision. And it led to so much pain in that team. Now, again, this is my other frustration. My wife, she is galvanizing. So now I understand what that is. And I get to turn to her and ask for that. Hey, can you help me galvanize that? As a parent, I get to, she galvanizes the kids. I also get to see her. She's a example of what that galvanizing can look like, and that's so helpful to me. I can literally feel myself channeling my wife's voice at times because I can see how to galvanize. But we tend to hire people just like ourselves. We surround ourselves with people very similar to us. And so you might not have that example. But so galvanizing is the other half of the decision. It's like the starter in the car. It's lights and sirens. It's big, it's disruptive, but then it kind of passes. I love the phrase, if a tree fell in the woods and no one was there, did it make a sound? If a galvanizer galvanizes to a room and there's no enablement, did anything actually get done? Because enablement, this is where we actually get to the implementation phase of work, where we actually go hands-on and get it done. This takes the work from about 1% complete, where we've made the decision, to about 80% complete. This is where so much work happens. Because for these people, they get the most joy and energy from helping to move a process forward, to help it move along. Now, it's not worried about finishing, it's worried about helping. And the crave here is appreciation. And this is something that in a corporate environment, it's been really interesting how this has changed over the years, because we've got so good with computers to make data come in, you do some work, clickety clack, and it goes out the other side. But two things happen there. One, you lost the person asking for help because it's showing up on a spreadsheet doesn't count. A gentleman I worked with, he's in IT his whole career, and he said it used to be someone would walk up to you and say, hey, Ted, could you help me with this? I need this report by this and this date. Sure. He was galvanized. He had enablement. He loved it. Sure, happy to help. He'd take the report, he'd put it together. He was an ET, by the way, so I'd love to put it to completion, get it perfect. And he'd go over and he'd deliver it to the person and say, here you go, here's your report. Oh, thank you, Ted. Appreciation. He got that appreciation from his colleague. He was galvanized and appreciation was shown. Yay! It worked. But so many people with enablement talk about what I've come to define as dying behind a desk, where they need people. They need to have that interaction with other people. Otherwise, they start to, like, it feels like they're withering. Because that enablement is so often that human touch. I love the phrase, there's no greater tool in medicine than the human hand. It can treat, diagnose, and it just has this incredible intuitive ability. Now, the problem is it's not very scalable. This is why nursing, education, elder care, all of these things are becoming harder and harder, because in a world where you can scale almost everything else, that person-to-person experience doesn't scale very well. And so that enablement, it just wants to help. Now, from there, this is where tenacity takes over. Tenacity takes over at that 80%, goes, oh, this is what we're doing? All right, I'll get that done. And it craves clarity because it is a hammer. If you're going to swing a 10-pound maul, you better know that what you're hitting is the right thing. It takes a lot of energy to swing it, so you only get so many swings. And when you hit, it's going to have an impact, so you better know what you're hitting and why. And if you don't have that clarity, it becomes really anxiety-ridden. And ambiguity and changing standards, not good. People with tenacity really crave that clarity and doing it right the first time. So the point is that that enablement and tenacity, those are two halves of implementation of work. Enablement says, yeah, I'd love to help. I always have my gloves. Oh, shoot, we're not done. What time do you want me back tomorrow? Tenacity goes, you go home. I got this. Gonna get it done, because otherwise, what did we even do here today? Now, enablement and tenacity, this is where much of the population lives. 48% of the population has enablement. Literally almost half the world gets joy and energy just from helping, but they need to be galvanized. And 40% has tenacity, the expectation of getting it done. So often, if the work's not getting done, it's usually an issue of clarity or communication. So a lot of people ask me, it's like, hey, tenacity, getting it done, why isn't that just enough? This is one of my favorite examples. If you've ever worked in the trades, you've unfortunately probably seen something like this, where it's like, hey, the wire ran exactly according to the plan. Well, maybe we didn't wonder, maybe we didn't consider all the problems that we were trying to solve. So this is why tenacity isn't enough, because this is tenacity gone wild. Not always a good day when that happens, but so basically, if we're looking at this, the point is that altitude, that wonder, is that blimp perspective. That hammer, his tenacity, is the ground level perspective. And if we're looking at a gap analysis, tenacity is really close to the current state, and wonder and invention can see that desired future state. One of my favorite phrases from somebody with a WI frustration. He's a GDET, so he had that WI frustration. He said, I can drive any team up any hill and get to the top every single time, and we're going to have fun. But I need someone else to put the light at the top of the hill. This is why eventually he went back to W-2 work rather than being a fractional, because he needed someone else to help him get that view of where they're trying to go. So these meetings, these conversations are very much wonder-based conversations. Why is this happening? How does this show up for you? These are wonder-based conversations. Now, like I said, breakdown of geniuses, a lot more people doing the work than sitting around thinking about it. But they're all necessary. And we need to learn how to communicate and understand the value that people bring in different phases of the work. We're finally getting to the point where we can more of worry about that wonder and invention because there's time. And we can learn to draw that out of people. The best leaders, people with wonder as a frustration, what they learn to do is, I don't like to wonder, but I know somebody does. And so I can walk away, or I can help someone wonder. I can implement wonder upon you. I can make you wonder. So then the idea comes from you. This is great sales training. This is great leadership training. It all talks about teaching people to wonder, or at least having patience to allow someone else to wonder, so that when you come back, now you can talk about the solution. This isn't easy for everyone, and it's something that ultimately we all learn at some point, or we don't. A lot of people don't. But if you do learn it, it is learned. It's never really innate. So many of the leaders that I've talked about this 20-year transition. For me, I burned out in a job for 10 years, being in jobs that were completely wrong for me. This is my results. Discernment galvanizing. I was in a very heavy galvanizing role. I'm like, I'm a competent adult. Why can't I just do this like everybody else? Why can't I just be normal? But here's the other piece of this. What we're looking at, everything that you've seen so far, is a linear example of work. There's a beginning, middle, and end. It's simple. It's how most people think. It's how most companies plan. And it's finite. It's about getting to that T. But ultimately, that's not really good enough anymore. And really, it hasn't been for quite some time. You think about that athlete, that Olympic athlete, who spends 20 years driving for a goal, and they get gold! Hooray! Now what? You wake up the next morning, all of a sudden, you don't know the problem you're there to solve anymore. That you need to go back up to wonder. And this is where systems like Lean or Six Sigma, they're structured systems of wonder to force you go back up to the top. I call it structured wonder because it forces you go back up to the top and it asks the new question. Because ultimately, that tenacity, when you get there, when you get it done, when you build that business, when you make that money, when you buy that car, great. Now what? Because we still need to show up and work every day. Falls fails just for ourselves. And that's where a looping perspective, understanding that You are meant to go through this process and come back out the other side. So individual analysis, first and foremost, most powerful thing in this is the fact that we tend to feel a lot of guilt about our frustrations. We'll judge ourselves, and we tend to do the fundamental attribution errors to others. So fundamental attribution error, this is where we judge someone and attribute it to a character flaw instead of part of their experience. My favorite example of this is if you're driving and someone cuts you off and is like, hey, do you even have a mother? Come on, who would do that? What kind of asshole would do that? And then 2 exits later, you're late for your interview and it's like, sorry, and you cut somebody off because you need to get to that exit. We judge the person and then we give ourselves grace. That's a fundamental attribution error. And now that we understand people's joy and pain, their geniuses and frustrations, we can ask, okay, is this a frustration issue? Or oh, wait, that's not a character issue. You're just not meant to do that. That's the conversation that this allows us to have. So I'd like you to take a moment here and contemplate. Have you ever recognized certain geniuses or frustrations you might have throughout this talk? Was there something that you picked up on that's like, ooh, that's caused me some issues. I've done that too much. Someone with galvanizing I love to said, I got feedback from a coworker that the volume at which I talk is already at the limit that the human ear can handle. And when I get excited, it gets louder. An example where a genius goes too far. Have you ever felt judged for your frustrations? This is universal. I literally, almost every room I've been in, everyone raises their hand because it's like, yep, yep, that's happened. Have you ever judged someone for your geniuses? Again, something we all do. And lastly, how have these experiences shaped your career? When you look back, is there certain things, is there a certain thin red line that you've seen through your career? And ultimately, the point of this is now that you can see that, now that you understand that, once you understand what you're meant to do, what it looks like to get to that self-actualization, you can create alignment. And alignment is important in every other area of life. From your spine, chiropractic, to cars. When a car wheel is out of alignment, you wear through the tread really fast and it doesn't go very well. It's the same thing in work. You spend 8 hours a day or more working. Why would alignment not be important there? It is. Now we have the language to help us figure out how to achieve that. So Dwight D. Eisenhower, I love the phrase, leadership is the art of getting someone else to do something you want done because they want to do it. When you align people with their geniuses, they want to do it. And you don't need to tell them again most of the time. It might take a minute or two to set up the system, but that's the point is once we're there, people want to do the work. So team analysis, in so many ways, this is where the collaboration design comes in, and it's doing lean in people systems. So lean is in manufacturing systems, moving products through production systems. It's reducing waste. With people, it's moving problems solving through people systems. And again, it's about reducing waste, reducing that burnout that you experience. Now, what people tend to do is hire a bunch of people like themselves, and it creates bottlenecks in organizations. This is the team that I was telling you about before that had all that galvanizing frustration. So many people willing to do the work, but nobody willing to make the decision, because both halves of the decision, frustrations. So they're stuck. And we see this all the time. This is the norm. In this case, yep, tons of WID. This team got stuck in their head all the time. And the galvanizing enablement, they can never get out and actually sell the idea. This team, they dealt with the controller said, I've written down cigarette butts in the parking lot 52 times, and I will write down cigarette butts in the parking lot 52 more times, because the owner, the leader, showed up and talked about it every time. but never developed a system or asked, how else do you think we could solve that? Is there a bigger way other than just saying it every day? That wonder, that willingness to sit up and wonder, it was a frustration for everybody. And ultimately, the point is, all of these, it's a map. It allows you to read a team like a map and understand, oh, that's a giant valley, that's a giant frustration there. And it allows us to have those conversations. And sure, those conversations, it could lead to some conflict, but that's a good thing because we actually need the 3 C's. Because conflict is good. You need communication and you need to risk conflict to achieve clarity. But so often people forego communication to avoid conflict, and then we lose clarity. And the thing is, leaders must go first. They have to. And the conflict continuum there, most organizations stay way too close to artificial harmony because they don't want to risk any conflict. But conflict is good. It's what allows us to get to the other side of an issue. And a leader has to be willing to first be vulnerable, and then they need to be willing to engage in conflict. So again, we're here for the top, that self-actualization, that's what we're trying to do. And when you manage to actually achieve that, then you get to interdependence. So dependence, this is the first stage of development. Independence is where, hey, you're a teenager, you can feed yourself, you can clothe yourself, you got a car, you can now drive yourself. But that interdependence, where you can actually form that transformational relationship with other people in your life, Dan Sullivan talks a lot about this. It is so hard, and probably less than 10% of people actually achieve true interdependence. But when you can learn to have these conversations, that's what's possible. Thank you. Lastly, don't forget to look up. This is a phrase that I learned. I was a police officer for a period of time. And they told a story about they got called and this guy was really dangerous. So they sent everybody right away. They had 20 squads there in like 5 minutes or less. And they couldn't find him. He was nowhere to be found. Turns out he had heard the lights and sirens and scampered up the tree in the front yard. They had the command center set up right under him, and he's sitting 3 feet above him, trying to hold his breath, going. Finally, somebody looked up. And in the end, if you feel burned out, if you feel stressed, and if you feel like your job just isn't working for you, taking a moment to look up, Working Genius is available online, or you can come talk to me. But if you feel burned out, if you experience where you feel stuck, where you're always tripping over that same problem, Working Genius is incredible at surfacing that and taking that thing that we try and hide because we're ashamed about and bringing it to the surface so we can have a real conversation. So I look forward to any questions or anything you want to share. All right, so the question, how do you balance optimizing for strengths while still ensuring all necessary tasks get done, even the ones outside of people's genius zones? Okay, so when it comes to Working Genius, the goal is not that you spend all of your time in your geniuses. The ideal distribution that very few people actually end up achieving is 50% of your time in your geniuses, 30% of time in your competencies, and 20% of your time in your frustrations. So understanding that, hey, even if you dislike this, you could still end up doing it for an hour, hour and a half a day, because 20% of an 8-hour day is still somewhere in that hour to hour and a half range. So it doesn't mean that you don't need to do those things that you don't like. It means that you figure out how to minimize that. And so much of this is what I talk about with collaboration design, that the point is you can actually intentionally go, hey, I dislike this, but the person who's sitting next to me for 2 years loves this. Do I really need to be the one to do that? Can we have this conversation? Why am I the one doing it? That's a reasonable question, and that's what I help people surface. Next question. What advice do you give for improving collaboration, hybrid or remote teams where misalignment is harder to detect? So this is again where having this language, having a team map is really helpful because yeah, you're remote. You can't sit next to these people. You don't see the idea guy always popping off with new ideas. He's just a faceless person on the other side of the screen. But the point is, and invention's the easiest one because frankly, it's super scalable. It's the pop of the new novel idea. Hey, can I borrow your invention for a minute? This is the problem I'm trying to solve. And this is the ideas I've come up with in the past. Do you have any others? And the point is, you can ask this for any of them. Discernment, one of my frustrations. I now understand I can go to my implementer, or sorry, my integrator, and go, hey, can you help me discern this? And he literally is like, oh, I'm getting chills. This is so much fun. Because it helps you to understand where the other person finds joy. And when you ask for help, you're not putting a burden on them, you're giving them a gift. And so when you're remote or hybrid, having that understanding of who you can go to for help in that area is transformational because it allows you to go, oh, wait, I'm stuck there. And then you can look at the team map and go, okay, who can help me cross that chasm? So how can leaders practically use working genius model in day-to-day decision making, not just in workshops? So I touched on some of that right there, that you can actually use this in your day-to-day language. My wife will ask for my wonder all the time. Honey, can you come wonder about this for a minute? Right? That it actually gives you the language to do that. Where you're frustrated, it's 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. This is where most models fail. I'm an individual working and I'm pissed off because I'm working one of my frustrations. One, just knowing, oh, wait, there's a reason I'm pissed off. I better figure this out next time. That can help you satiate that pain. Or being able to go, I'm stuck here. How do I get past that? So an example, I was working with a large publicly traded company and they had the parent company and 8 subsidiaries, and they had to get, they were trying to go through an ERP change for 10 years. Wasn't going well. But the one aspect that they were trying to get through, he's like, I talked to this team for months. We emailed and we called and nothing happened. And it's just like we communicated for months. Finally, he had a galvanizer on his team, and he got that person in the room with that team and literally sat them down and said, okay, this is what questions you have. This is really important. How can we get to the other side? And in literally 2 hours, they made more progress with that team than the other guy made for 6 months. Now, in the end, that 6 months was really groundwork. I'm sure that was being laid. But the point is that when you can understand, okay, I need someone to go communicate this to that other team. Sure, you're the subject matter expert, but that doesn't mean you're the one to get them excited about it, right? So it allows you to actually understand that in the day-to-day, and because it's so simple and it is 6 letters and we all have the same 6 letters just in different orders. This makes it so easy to be able, and you can literally see it in people. Once you see it, you can't not. And so you can go, hey, can you galvanize this for me? That's how you use that in the day-to-day, not just in workshops. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. That's been a pleasure. That one you'll have to talk to iExperts about getting the recording. I think that they do post this later though. unless I'm mistaken. Wonderful. All right, well, I will count on you guys to shut this down at the appropriate time. Otherwise, if anybody has any other questions, happy to answer. Absolutely. Sure. All right, I'm going to go camera off then. Have a wonderful day.